You think you're the nice guy. You never raise your voice. You always say yes. You avoid conflict. But here's the truth I see in therapy every single week, that behind every nice guy is a man full of anger, resentment, and sometimes even hatred. He's angry at being overlooked. He's angry at being taken advantage of. He's angry at himself for never speaking up. He's angry at himself for missing his life and not being an active participant. The longer you keep that anger buried under politeness, the more it's going to leak out as resentment, passive aggression, and even self-destruction. Did that hit you in the gut? This episode's for you. I'm Marc Azoulay, founder of Men's Therapy Online and host of the Men's Therapy Podcast. And in this solo episode, we're going to be talking about one of the topics that comes up time and time again, both on the podcast and in my work with clients, the nice guy syndrome. If you're not familiar with it, check it out. We've interviewed the author, Dr. Robert Glover, tons of times on the show. We have a bunch of blogs on nice guy syndrome. All that stuff is at menstherapy.online. It's a great way to familiarize yourself with it. I truly believe that the No More Mr. Nice Guy book by Dr. Glover is the most important book written about men in the past 10 years. And I'm not saying that lightly. I think it is really, really important. Most of the guys that come through my doors are that type of archetype. It's not what I think a lot of my industry talks about with men, where they think that we're these kind of like bully, brutish, violent, like Neanderthals. Like the therapy industry is so far behind, and it's embarrassing, frankly. But what I see with most men is that they're nice guys. They're people pleasers. They're guys that never say no, that they want everything to be smooth. They want no conflict. They want peace and harmony and equanimity. And while those things are not bad, the way they go about getting those things is by completely silencing themselves. And ultimately, they never really attain peace because internally they're angry, they're resentful, and they have a lot of regrets about their lives. So let's dig into it. Nice guy syndrome, it comes from early childhood conditioning, right? Like most things, we learn the way that it takes to survive, right? So if you lived in a house with a chaotic parent, maybe a narcissistic parent, maybe a parent that was abusive, maybe there's alcohol or drugs in the home, or maybe you just had a parent that, bulldozed you a lot, you're going to become a nice guy because you're learning that, especially as a kid, right? You're not gonna be able to fight an adult. You're going to lose every single time, guaranteed. So what the kid will learn to do is instead of battling the parent, they're going to roll over. They're going to be compliant. They're going to do whatever they need to do to get the parent off their back. And oftentimes this looks like high performance, So a lot of these nice guys, a lot of the guys that end up working with me and my contractors, at MTO are guys that are very successful, right? Guys that, got really good grades in school, that got a great degree, that have a wonderful job, that are very secure and stable because they've learned at a young age that the best way to avoid negative attention is to succeed, is to just make things work. And while again, that's not a bad thing, right? I'm not going to demonize success. We're not here to pathologize your high performance lifestyle, but look a little bit deeper. Is that coming from fear? Does it feel disingenuous? Are you angry underneath it? That's what we're talking about here. It's not about what you do or where you're going. It's about what fuels you, what gets you there. And like any fuel, there's pollutants to nice guy syndrome. You might be succeeding 9 times out of 10, but that one time, that's when the anger comes up. If you notice yourself self-sabotaging, that can look like procrastination, that can look like drug and alcohol use, that can look like porn addiction, whatever it is. There's often this pollutant in the system because it's not coming from a place of passion or even interest. It's just coming from a place of obligation and often fear. So as we're digging into anger, again, anger is not the enemy. In fact, I think anger is a very masculine expression of emotion. And we need to be able to understand our anger, listen to it, figure out what message the anger is trying to send us rather than suppressing it. It's that suppression that's the problem. Because, there's a lot of strong guys out there, a lot of strong guys listen to this podcast, but your anger is stronger than you. It will always, always win. And it will come out sideways, whether that be in, a hot anger episode, what you think of, yelling, screaming, breaking something, throwing your phone, storming off, whatever it is, right? Or what's actually more common with nice guys, which is cold anger, that deep, bitter, shitty resentment As a recovering nice guy, I know what that is like. I know what it was like to live in a world where I was very cynical, where I was a hater, frankly. I was a critic. I was so afraid of trying, frankly, right? I was so afraid of putting myself in the arena that I stayed in the stands. And, through therapy, my own personal work, I've done a lot of work to try to get out there more and not just fall to this cold anger, cynicism, resentment thing. It creeps up. I'm going to be honest. It does creep up. And I have to actively combat that, whether that's in my professional life, in my family, or with my friends. I have to try to name when I find myself withdrawing. So what can happen from this cold anger and resentment is you can be passive aggressive. In the Nice Guy book, and we won't talk about it too much in this episode, but go back and listen to the other ones with Dr. Glover or read the book. We do it for our book club, every few years at MTO as well. So that's another opportunity to really dig in deep. But what a kind of key point of being a nice guy is a covert contract. It's the idea of doing a bunch of things and expecting something in return, which is, again, fine. That's relationships. But the problem is that it's covert. The problem is that it's never, ever, ever spoken about. So a really common one with a lot of guys that I see, again, let's call it 7 or 8 times out of 10, is they're in a relationship with a partner, right? They do everything for their partner. They clean the house. They have a job they don't really like, but it brings home a lot of money. They, have them on their health insurance. They are running around taking care of the kids. They've maybe sacrificed things that were important to them when it comes to making a family, such as their personal health and exercise. Right? Dad bod, or they have, sacrificed their own hobbies because they're trying to be really present and be really, really good husband for their partner. And when they do all this, what they expect is sex. And, that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And the guy gets pissed and he gets passive aggressive and he starts acting out and making shitty comments, right? In the most extreme version, it can look like a porn addiction, right? Go get those needs met elsewhere, or even an affair. But the partner doesn't know that the person is doing all that stuff just because they want to get laid or they want physical affection or they want to feel love. They don't know that they signed up for that pop quiz and they're going to fail it every time. Furthermore, if you're holding a lot of that anger and resentment, you can get health issues, right? Straight up. High stress, we know this. There's tons of data and research that backs this up. You're going to have, high blood pressure. You're going to have, heart incidents. You're going to have things like autoimmune disorders, right? If you're holding in all that and you're constantly in that state of being pissed and revved up, you're in an adrenal state. And that for a long time is going to start to degrade your health. And then the very last thing that's, massive is relationship breakdowns. A lot of guys come to therapy because of divorce. And of those guys, a lot of them are nice guys because just of this thing I'm talking about. They've made these contracts. They're not being fulfilled. They end up detaching, getting angry. Maybe there's an explosive incident. Maybe there's an affair. But those things are not what I'm interested in as a therapist. What I'm interested in is what happened 5 years ago, right? When did it start to degrade? When did this start to fall apart? That's more interesting than like the big incident. The big incident, it's exciting. It takes up a lot of time. It often is the thing that gets referenced over and over again. But the seeds were planted a long time ago and often by the nice guy syndrome. So a typical client that has this, and you may, be this guy as you're listening. And if you are, I really encourage you, reach out to me. It's free. You can talk to me directly for 30 minutes, totally free. Learn about MTO, maybe work with me or one of my therapists. Absolutely no charge or commitment. But what the typical thing is the guy who has done everything right. He went through, like I said, got the good grades, got the good job, made money, does everything right. And he even sacrifices so much of his own life to be there for the people in his life. But there's always the shadow side, whether it's anger, whether it's addiction. There's kind of a double life aspect to a nice guy where they have a very, very strong boundary or barrier even between their nice guy persona. We talk about it at MTO as a nice guy mask, right? You put on this mask and who they are underneath that. The trick is, and this is kind of this psychological kind of psychoanalysis idea, is they think who they really are is the person behind that mask. And the person behind that mask is often the person who's angry, hateful, who's a critic, who maybe is an addict. That's not who you really are, right? That's just your shadow. That's what you're disowning by putting on the mask. Who you really are is both the mask and the shadow. And by integrating them, by actually bringing them together, you make the mask less masky, right? You make it less fake, and you make the shadow less destructive. And what you find is that you're an integrated man. But as long as there's that barrier between those two, it's going to really, really polarize. So the nicer you are, right, the more shadowy you're going to be as well. And if you're listening, you may know this, where your shadow behaviors, again, whether it's addiction or dissociating or being conflict avoidant or suppressing yourself, whatever it is, right? Like there's tons of different iterations here. It gets worse over time because the mask gets harder and harder and harder to take off. And that agreeableness that maybe worked in the beginning, right? It may have been necessary for your childhood and it may have worked early in your career, right? Or even early in relationships. I think, people and women and bosses like people that are agreeable, but over time they lose respect. Over time, you realize, oh, this person doesn't have a spine. Oh, this person will do whatever I want. This person doesn't advocate for themselves. And there's that kind of shitty truth about the world where the squeaky, wheel gets the grease. The more you advocate for yourself, and that means, yes, self-promotion, but also setting boundaries, saying no to things, the more you stand out, right? If you're just like a gooey mess of a person, you're going to fade into the background, even though you're doing all the right things. And that is the shitty trap that a lot of nice guys fall into, is they think they're doing everything right. And in some ways they are, right? I mean, they're doing what they need to do. They don't complain. They just, put their heads down and make it happen. But they end up being invisible. And invisible people don't get rewarded. They don't get relationships. They don't get promotions. They don't get success. They just end up kind of quietly ticking along in the background. And, you know, if you're listening to this, I imagine that is not the kind of life you want to have. You want to have a life where you're bold, where you're proud, where you're strong, and where you're able to really express yourself and be the man who I know you can be. So if you're experiencing this, if you're listening, and you're wondering, okay, is this me? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, if you think it's you, it's probably you. But I'll go through some typical kind of signs, right? So the first one, obviously, is you can't say no. But I want to dig into that more. It's not that you can't say no; it's that you are terrified of saying no. So think back. Was there a time in your life, in your family, in your career, whatever it was, when somebody asked you to do something and you didn't want to do it? Maybe it was really inconvenient. Maybe you were already overwhelmed. You didn't have the bandwidth and the resources to make it work, but you couldn't say no. And what do you feel in that moment? Most nice guys feel deep, deep terror, truly terror, like beyond fear, terror, terror of letting somebody down, of not being good enough, of disappointing others, right? These are kind of these core motivators that are stronger than any self-help, any kind of system or self-help work you're going to do. Terror is going to win every time. That's why, at therapy, we try to root out that terror, feel it, conquer it, and then move forward. You might also experience simmering resentment, right? or looping thoughts. So a very practical way is like if you're just walking through your day and you're pissed off about something or someone constantly, that's a good indicator that you're probably a nice guy and you're sitting with a lot of resentment. If you find your mind during quiet moments just going towards a shit list, I hate this person sucks, this other person, I hate them, blah, 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 right? You're just like going through this constantly, rotating list of villains, probably a nice guy. That's what resentment is. It is an obtrusive thought. It is a thought that you're not even in control of, but just comes into your mind and just you obsess and obsess and obsess and ruminate over it over and over again. Another really common example or symptom is sarcasm. Psychoanalysis, modern psychoanalysis, what I studied, they see sarcasm as covert anger. I find that really interesting, right? Because a lot of sarcasm either comes from two places. It has two goals. One, it comes from a bitterness about the world, right? Kind of a cynical attitude where it's like, oh yeah, that's never going to work out, right? Like this kind of like downtrodden, often even miserable attitude. Or it's like a sneaky jab where you're saying something that is true for you, right? Maybe a negative thing about another person, but you're able to be like, oh no, it's a joke. It's a joke. I'm being sarcastic. It's a joke. I don't mean it. But that's that resentment starting to kind of like squeak out sideways. And what sarcasm is it's by definition, it is not honest. right? Sarcasm is like saying something that is like so clearly a lie, it must be funny. It's not honest, it's not authentic. And the cure for being a nice guy is being authentic. How do you start to get this? How do you be authentic? How do you start to get out of being a nice guy, being stuck behind the mask, right? This mask kind of like glued onto your face, and you can't quite get it off, right? So first thing is you start naming when you're angry. First internally, right? Mindfulness helps. Again, study Buddhism for years. I think Buddhist practice, meditation could be really helpful. Mindfulness, right? If you don't like the spiritual aspect, mindfulness meditation is a scientifically proven, evidence-backed way to get to know yourself. So start naming anger internally. Start admitting that you're angry, right? First step, same with addiction, right? Like the first step is admitting that you have a problem. So saying, hey, I'm angry internally. I'm not the nice guy. I'm not as perfect as I pretend to be. I'm not as, infallible as I pretend to be. I need to take responsibility for this. Until you can do that, none of this other shit's going to work at all. Because you're going to be defended. You're going to be totally defended. And look, there are so many other guys, right? Me, my therapist, other people in the MTO community, tons of men out there, tons of podcasters. Like there is a whole community of men that just want you to be honest. We're here. We're waiting. We're ready. We're not going to judge you, right? We've all been there. It actually is more strong to admit that you're angry and bitter and pissed off because then you can start to work, right? You're not going to stay there, right? We're not going to let you stay there. We're going to try to push you, encourage you, motivate you, hold you accountable sometimes to becoming a better version of yourself. But until you can really look yourself in the mirror and be like, God damn it, I'm angry. Fuck, I don't like my life right now. That's a very vulnerable thing to say, right? That's a vulnerable thing to say. And that's the first step. So the first thing is naming anger, right? First with yourself. And then level 2, with somebody else. Way harder, way harder, but really, really important. If you're in a relationship and your partner does something even minor, start with minor, right? That's low stakes, right? Minor that pisses you off. Maybe they, I don't know, like don't do the dishes in the right way or load the dishwasher wrong, or they missed a commitment, right? They said they would be ready at X time and they're not ready, right? Like minor things, stuff that happens to all of us all the time. Start to say, hey, you know what? That made me a little angry. I'm irritated by that. I'm frustrated by that. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to express it. You don't have to change it. You don't have to cure it, but by naming like, hey, that actually that thing that you did actually kind of pissed me off. You can do it, with humor to begin with. That can be really helpful because you're not lying to yourself and you're not lying to the other person. Just because you're angry with someone doesn't mean that your relationship's over. A lot of nice guys feel that way. That anger, expressing anger, is really, really dangerous. And for many of us, as our childhood, it was. So you're not crazy, right? But you have to try to learn that you can express it and still love somebody else. You can express anger and still go on with your day. It doesn't have to mean anything, but it does help release some of that pressure. With that, you can practice low stakes boundary setting. Most guys have pet peeves. Everyone has them, right? Start setting boundaries around that, saying, "Hey, you know what? I know this doesn't really matter to you, but it does matter to me, and I'd like this to be this way instead of that way. I'd really like it if we had all the dishes done before we went to bed. I know it doesn't really matter. I know you're going to do it in the morning, but I just really can't calm down at night when I know that there's stuff to be done around the house, right? Or I'd really appreciate if." You would communicate scheduling around the kids, right? If we maybe have a shared calendar or something, I don't know. But I find I feel like I'm really reactive. That I don't know what we're doing every day, and you tell me what to do, and then I just kind of scramble and do it. And I make it work. We make it work, but I just don't feel like I'm in control of my life. I would love if we could have a system where I would know at least a couple days in advance what is going on for our family. Things like that, right? Here's some examples that you can use where if you notice, I'm not being aggressive. I'm not being a dick. I'm not demanding anything. I'm just setting a boundary. I'm saying, hey, this is something that would really help me, help us, and help our family. Try that, right? Low stakes to begin with. Next on, using I language, right? A lot of guys, we are externalizers. So when we're angry, we, shit talk somebody else, or we get mad at the news or about politics or about whatever is going on in our company, right? Try to anchor it to yourself. Practice that. Say you know what, how is this impacting me personally? Instead of just reaming some, straw man that you've built, say, hey, you know what? When I look at the news, for instance, I feel afraid, or I feel hopeless, or I feel really confused. I don't know what to do. If you start doing that again, you're being more authentic instead of just being either nice guy mask, completely passive, or super duper pissed. And that's what most nice guys are. Like they're very binary, you know? Um, so a way to do that, right, is men's groups. I'm going to talk about them time and time again. They are phenomenal for this. Of course, we offer them at Men's Therapy Online. But a men's group is wonderful because you can be brutal with us, right? We're guys, we get it. We know our emotions, especially when we're first learning how to express them, can be pretty shitty. You know, we can say some nasty shit. We have aggression and violence within us. You know, in the groups, we call that the shitty first draft, right? You can come to the group, you can give us your shitty first draft. Just be honest, be angry, be pissed, be messy, whatever it is. Like, that's really good, right? Like, get that poison, that venom out of there. Done. Get it out. And then your therapist, your group members can help you craft that into something that you can bring to your partner, to your boss, to your kids, whoever it is, right? We can say, okay, totally heard, totally get it. You know, here's the experience I had that's similar, right? Help you feel that you are not alone, that you're not crazy. And then say, and, you know, like you probably don't want to say that to your wife, but I'm hearing 2 or 3 key points. Let's get them dialed in. Let's figure out how you can express it in a way that she's actually going to hear and you're actually going to get the shit to happen. And let's move forward from there. I think men need that. We need sounding boards. We need to be able to let go and then feel the wisdom of other dudes in the room, right? Really, really critical. I think it's like a huge thing that every guy should have in their life, whether it's through our company, really good group of friends, your church or spiritual community, whatever it is. Like find your guys that you can really be honest about, because you can't be totally honest all the time in the world. Our world is not made that way. It does not function that way. So you need to actively find places where you can be honest and be authentic, and then take enough of that, again, distill it down to kind of a crystallized form, and then take that out into the world. That will make you so much more effective as a man. So as we're wrapping up here, I'm curious, right? You know, if you're watching this video or you're listening on the podcast channel, leave a comment. Leave a comment on our YouTube. That's kind of the place that I'm monitoring the most. Leave a comment of, you know, what's the time that you bit your tongue and then regretted it? What's the time that the nice guy won? And I think if you say that, if you talk about that, you're gonna find there's guys gonna be like, oh yeah, me too. Because you're not alone in it. Like that's the main thing. You're not alone in this. So check out the YouTube. We also have our MTO Slack, which is totally free now. It's open to the public. It's a place to talk about the stuff that's confidential, private, that is a way that you can be honest and start to find your brothers. Again, no commitment, no charge for that. You can find that on our website. So menstherapy.online. There's a button, resources, MTO Slack. You can join it, participate. There's a lot of good conversations going on there of people that are just like you talking about these things constantly. So thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate the time. If you really got a value out of this, do all the social stuff, right? Like, share, subscribe. You know what to do by now. Check out our website, menstherapy.online. And I will see you next week for the episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast.